A woman's strength begins where her habit of being accommodating ends. When she no longer adapts to other people's moods, no longer dims her light so as not to disturb anyone. This decision is rarely easy to make. It causes fear, as if without convenience, love will disappear. But in reality, it is the first step towards true freedom, towards breaking out of the role of savior, which means refusing to carry other people's lives on your shoulders. No longer listening to stories that end the same way every time, no longer rescuing those who do not want to change their reality. This is not cruelty, it is maturity. Because help that has become a habit ceases to be a good thing and becomes a dependency. Emotional slavery begins with, I must be good. I must be calm, gentle, understanding. Even when it hurts. Even when I am ignored, used, or betrayed. But a woman who has chosen strength stops currying favor. She does not beg or persuade. Her voice sounds different, firm but not loud. And most importantly, she rearranges her priorities. Not around relationships, not around someone else's comfort, but around herself, her growth, her depth. Because when a woman begins to live at the center of her life, everything unnecessary begins to fall away, and everything real is drawn to her. A woman who has accepted strength stops explaining herself. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she no longer needs someone else's understanding to be herself. This decision is painful, but liberating. Because it breaks the last thread of dependence on someone else's approval, and to stop explaining means to stop justifying your pain, decisions, and changes. This is a freedom that those around you do not immediately understand. But a woman who lives from the depths no longer bargains for acceptance. She does not explain why she has lost interest, why she does not respond, why she no longer goes where she is ignored, the point of strength of silence. This is not resentment. It is a sign of maturity. Because those who want to understand will understand without words. And those who are used to demanding explanations will not hear even the most sincere explanations. A woman who has chosen herself knows that silence is also a language. A language of respect for herself, for this decision, changes the boundaries of communication. She no longer continues a conversation where she is devalued, does not return to a dialogue where she is forced to justify herself, because a woman who has stopped explaining herself no longer fights for what should be natural respect. Female strength begins where clinging ends. For a person, for a situation, for an idea that has long since died. This is not about indifference. It is about maturity, which no longer confuses love with retention. A woman who has stopped clinging chooses not to grasp. Letting go of the fear of loss is a painful but honest path. Because behind the fear of loss there is almost always the fear of being left without meaning. A woman who has decided not to cling faces this fear head-on. And suddenly she discovers that everything that truly matters to her is not going anywhere. And everything that disappears was actually already lost. She just didn't want to admit it. Inner permission is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. It is when you allow the world to be as it is, without trying to hold on to what is leaving. You don't freeze in the past. You don't build illusions. A woman who lets go does not lose. She frees up space. And something new comes into that space. Not because she asked for it, but because she is ready for it. Because when you stop clinging, you stop creating tension. And then life begins to flow differently. Calmer, clearer. A woman's power blossoms when she stops living according to other people's scripts. When she stops asking what is right and starts asking what is real. The decision to listen to yourself is not about selfishness. It is about honesty, trust in your intuition. It is not mysticism. It is that inner silence where the true voice sounds. A woman who has chosen herself stops looking for confirmation outside herself. She doesn't need advice for every step she takes. Because she begins to feel that if she is calm inside, then she is right. This is the power of inner strength, the foundation of freedom. A woman who has learned to say no, where she used to endure, feels the taste of true consent for the first time. Because she is no longer driven by fear. Not by duty. But out of a deep agreement with herself that the only way out of the world of other people's expectations is to return home. A woman no longer tries to be convenient, beautiful, understandable. She simply is. At her own pace, with her own desires, in her own truth. And that is what makes her truly attractive. Because she does not live to please others. She lives to be herself. A woman's strength begins to grow the moment she stops being convenient. When she gets tired of smiling out of politeness, agreeing out of fear, and pretending that everything is fine just so as not to upset anyone. This decision may seem drastic. But in fact, it is a return to herself. For too long, women have lived in a world where being good is almost an obligation. Don't offend, don't argue, don't step out of line. Hold back your feelings, do as you are asked, and maybe you will be loved. But that's not love, that's training. A woman who has chosen herself begins to take off these masks. And the first thing she notices is discomfort. She becomes uncomfortable. For those who are used to taking advantage of her kindness. For those who knew that she always adapts. For those who took her silence as consent. But with this discomfort comes not loneliness, but freedom. Only the habit of bending over backwards does not go away immediately. It has grown into her skin, her speech, her movements. A woman who chooses freedom learns to stand up straight. Not in the sense of aggression, but in the sense of dignity. She looks at the world differently. As a person who has the right to her feelings, her desires, her no's, and that no sometimes sounds for the first time. It may be fragile, trembling, but there is more strength in it than in 1,000 yes said out of fear. A woman who has decided to no longer be convenient does not become harsh. She becomes real. And this authenticity is her strongest defense. There are women who know how to be there for others but do not know how to be there for themselves. Who comfort, care for, and save everyone except themselves. And in this forgetting of oneself lies the root of fatigue, resentment, and inner emptiness. Strength begins with a different decision. Being with yourself, not betraying yourself for the sake of others, refusing to seek support outside yourself. This is a step into silence. When it becomes clear that no one will come and make you whole. No one will heal the pain that you have kept under the mask of a smile for years. A woman who has decided to be with herself stops seeking salvation in love, in recognition, in the hands of others. Because for the first time she feels that she already has support. She herself is the point of formation of her inner home, a gentle and lengthy process. A woman stops scolding herself, blaming herself, shaming herself. She begins to be kind, not only to others, but also to herself. She asks, what about me? What do I need right now? Why am I tired of putting up with this? And in this attention to herself, the most important thing is born. Trust and stability do not come immediately. First there is anxiety, then silence, and then suddenly peace comes. Without explanations, without guarantees, just a feeling, I am close to myself. I don't run away, I don't betray, I don't abandon. A woman who chooses to be herself does not become lonely. she becomes fulfilled. And then the question of who will fill the void no longer arises. Because there is no more emptiness. There is an inner support that holds everything together. There is something exhausting about trying to prove that you are worthy of love. Trying to be better, gentler, more beautiful. Justifying someone's rudeness so as not to seem difficult. Explaining your no so as not to be rejected. A woman who chooses strength once decides not to prove anything anymore. It all starts with awareness. If you have to convince someone of your worth, you've already lost. Because a real connection doesn't require effort to be seen. Those who are capable of love see you for who you truly are right away and don't ask you to become a convenient version of yourself. The point of decision is no longer to prove yourself. It's liberation. From the eternal need to be understood. From the endless desire to deserve. A woman stops justifying her feelings, desires, and boundaries. She no longer argues with those who do not hear her. Because she knows that true value cannot be proven. She feels this knowledge, I am enough, does not scream. It is quiet, calm, but there is enormous power in it. A woman stops imposing herself, running, explaining. If she is not chosen, she does not impose herself. If she is not heard, she does not shout, but becomes someone whose silence speaks louder than words. Not because she is offended, but because she is tired of fighting for a place in someone else's life. And in this silence there is maturity. Because her life no longer depends on someone else's recognition. Sometimes a woman can live her whole life without feeling her body. She may be ashamed of it, scold it, punish it with hunger or exhausting diets, compare it to others, hide it, ignore the signs of fatigue. And all this in an attempt to be correct, worthy, acceptable. But strength begins with a different decision. Return to your body. Your body is not your enemy. It is your home, the place where every emotion and every memory lives. A woman who chooses herself learns to feel not only pain, but also pleasure. Not only tension, but also relaxation. She stops living from her head and begins to listen to where she feels tight, where she feels cold, where she wants warmth, the point of acceptance of her nature. It's not about ideal shapes. It's about recognition. I have the right to be. With all her curves, tired hands, and wrinkles around her eyes, a woman ceases to fit into standards because she feels herself from within. And there, life, the connection with the body, restores strength because intuition is stored in it. It holds wisdom about when to go, when to stop, when to lie down and just breathe. A woman who has returned to her body no longer allows others to cross her boundaries because she feels those boundaries with her skin. It is through this connection with herself that healing comes. Not from books, not from advice, but from the body. A woman begins to dance, to touch herself with respect, to look in the mirror without disgust. And in this acceptance, a radiance is born that cannot be compared to any cosmetics. Because this radiance comes from within. Expectations are an invisible form of self-betrayal. It starts small, waiting for someone to write, to call, to remember. Then it expands imperceptibly, waiting for changes, waiting for recognition, waiting for someone to understand without words. And then suddenly you realize, life is not lived in actions, but in constant tension, as if your heart is hiding in a corner and is afraid to move. A strong woman is not one who has succeeded in everything. She is one who has stopped putting herself off until later, who once realized that it is not love if you have to return to it 100 times in your mind and re-evaluate other people's actions. It is not friendship if it tires you more than loneliness. It is not care if it requires you to wait at the door until the other person is ready. So she stops living on pause, no longer hangs between messages, no longer checks her status on social media, no longer builds her life around someone else's schedule, because the one who is always waiting is forever standing at the doorstep and never enters her own home. Now she makes her own choices, not out of fear of being alone, but out of respect for herself. She stops putting off joy, starts saying yes to what she wants and no to what wears her out. She no longer waits for someone to confirm her importance, she knows it. A woman who has given up waiting does not become indifferent. She becomes free, her heart is still capable of love, but she no longer allows love to control her. She does not chase attention because she has learned to be attentive to herself. Such a woman no longer clings because she understands that if something is meant to come, it will find its way, and if it does not, then it was not meant for her, and life is too short to waste it on platforms where no one promised to arrive. The world is used to the image of a woman who fights for attention, for relationships, for someone else's love, but true inner strength begins with awareness. Love is not a war, it is not a trophy, it is not a competition, it is not an achievement. True love is a meeting of two people who do not need to pretend. Those who have grown up in anticipation and pain often do not notice how they turn love into proof of their own worth. They begin to compete, compare, and earn, but there comes a moment when everything changes. They suddenly realize that they do not have to explain to anyone why they deserve to be there. Because dignity is not an argument. It is a state of being. From that moment on, she no longer fights, no longer explains her value, no longer competes with other women, because a woman who knows her worth does not enter the race. Her presence speaks for itself, and she chooses to be where she is chosen, without requests, without struggles. She stops trading herself for relationships where she constantly has to prove herself. Because where there is love, there should be no fight for attention, no fear, no awkwardness, no eternal tension in the heart. A woman who has stopped fighting for love chooses something else. Respect, calmness, honesty. She knows how to leave, not because she doesn't love, but because she no longer wants to trade her soul for the crumbs of someone else's affection. She hasn't become bitter, she has simply learned to distinguish between what is real and what is an illusion. And she has understood the main thing: true love does not need to be won. It is enough to be yourself for it to find its way. Sometimes inner fatigue comes not from work, from attempts to explain yourself, when you come into a relationship with an open heart again and again, and in response you get indifference, misunderstanding, or accusations. And every time you feel the urge to explain, I feel bad, you hurt me, I care. But one day, a woman stops making excuses, not because she has stopped feeling, but because she has felt too much, and she begins to understand. Those who want to understand will understand. Those who love will hear, the rest simply won't want to listen, and that's not her fault. Tiredness from constant explanations is not a weakness, it's a signal. A signal that it is enough to explain her pain to those who do not want to see it. Enough of being a translator from the language of feelings to the language of logic for those who can only listen to themselves. When a woman stops making excuses, she seems to return to herself, stops looking for the reason in herself. Maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe it's my fault. No, she no longer says maybe to herself, because she no longer doubts what she feels, and that is when peace of mind is born. Calmness in which there is no shouting, no desire to prove anything, only confidence. Confidence that an explanation is a choice, not an obligation, that relationships in which you are not heard are not worthy of your words. And then a woman begins to speak differently. Not with her voice, actions, requests, or distance. She doesn't make a scene, she doesn't accuse, she doesn't seek revenge, she just steps aside silently because she understands that silence is not weakness, it is an answer. The most honest, mature, and strongest woman does not stop loving, but begins to love herself a little more. Enough to not have to justify why she is hurt. Enough to not be ashamed of her vulnerability. Enough to not have to explain her value to herself. This is not a loud statement. It is a quiet but powerful decision. A decision that comes after many times when you gave too much, when you adapted, saved, endured, until one day you realized that no one will save you except yourself. A woman who has chosen herself is not one who no longer loves. She is one who has stopped betraying herself for the sake of someone else's comfort. She is not angrier or colder, she is more honest. More honest in not being where she is not appreciated, not waiting for someone to change, not hoping that her pain will be noticed if she endures a little longer. Now she doesn't chase after those who leave, doesn't run after those who are silent, doesn't look for reasons for other people's indifference, because she has stopped trying to explain to herself why she is being ignored. She is more interested in the question, why am I? This allowed her to do so. She removes from her life those who make her doubt her worth, does not seek revenge, does not accuse, simply leaves the game in which the rules were not written by her. And each such step is a return to herself, to who she was before she learned to be too accommodating. Now she lives from her inner center, listening not to the words of others, but to her own feelings, and building relationships not for the sake of salvation, but for the sake of reciprocity. She does not need, she chooses, she does not wait and see, she does not break down, she changes direction. And in this choice lies all her strength, because a woman's strength begins with one decision, to be herself, even if it is inconvenient. Not for everyone, but truly for herself. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to the Flow of Thoughts channel. The next video may be the next step for you. Thank you for watching, see you again soon.